Hi, I'm Gaia Bernstein. I'm a law professor and the co-director of the Institute for Privacy Protection and the Gibbons Institute for Law, Science and Technology at Seton Hall Law School. I'm the author of the book Unwired, Gaining Control Over Addictive Technologies. It wasn't one thing, it was quite a few things that happened around the same time. I started noticing things were different for me. I'm an academic, I would sit down to write, and 2 hours later, I realized nothing was done. And when I was thinking what has happened, I realized I just spent all this time looking at blogs, answering texts, answering emails, and not getting any work done. And then I looked around a bit more and I saw that things were changing a lot. I would go to kids' birthday parties and the kids were sitting next to each other, not talking, looking at their phones. And I went to shows, my kids' end of the year school performances, and you could barely see the show because I could just see a row of iPads in front of me. And but there was one thing I think that made a big difference for me and also really made me write this book. It was one Saturday afternoon. We went to a friend's house for dinner, and they had an 11-year-old, and he was playing with the iPad. And when we came in, his parents said, hand over the iPad, go play with the kids. And the kid was so angry, he wouldn't give it. And when they took it away from him, he just spent the entire evening trying to get it back in every possible manipulation. And that reminded me of something that happened in my parents' house a few years back. My father was diagnosed with emphysema. And it's one of these diseases that if you smoke and you're diagnosed with it, you can actually stop smoking and you don't get worse. So we tried everything we could to convince him to stop, and including taking away his cigarette pack. And he got so uncharacteristically angry and did everything to get a pack back. And it was at that moment that I realized, looking at my friend's son, that there was something very serious going on here because I saw the connection between my father and that boy. Yes, I think at the time people didn't even think about it. People were not talking about it. It was around maybe 2015 or so, and when I looked at it for the first time, I realized that there is something going on here that has happened before, and it really made me write this book, which looks into the past, not just the present, looks at the battles against tobacco, against food, or to protect privacy, to understand how we can deal with what's happening right now. I spent some time studying them, and I think there's a lot to learn. When I think there's one thing that was really central for me that came out of the study is the way that the tobacco industry, the food industries, and quite other powerful industries in the past, when they did something that was harmful, their strategy was, and the truth came out, it was harmful to the consumers. The strategy was the consumer chose to use our product. The consumer is responsible. And so if you look at the tobacco litigation, smokers that sued the cigarette companies in court, cigarette companies argued, well, you chose to smoke, so you're responsible for the lung cancer and anything else that happens. And they actually won these cases for quite a few decades with this argument. The courts didn't attribute responsibility to the cigarette companies. Same thing with food. There was a group of teens who sued McDonald's because they were obese, because they suffered from diabetes. And McDonald's argued, and the New York court agreed, basically that nobody forced them to eat at McDonald's, nobody forced them to supersize their meals. And what I find interesting is that's exactly what the tech companies are doing. They are, first of all, they're already using this expressly. They are saying when the game manufacturers had to talk at the Federal Trade Commission about loot boxes. They said the gamers chose to play. They or their parents are responsible, and they're very sophisticated. They give us tools to help us be in control and be responsible. Because if we are responsible, they are not. So the illusion of control is basically this idea that we are choosing how much time we spend online. Now, what is true is that we did choose to get a smartphone. I chose to join Facebook. We choose to play a game. But what we did not choose is for every one of these apps that we downloaded to end up taking so much of our time. Now, the average adult spends over 5 hours on their phone. Half of teens say they are nearly constantly online. That is a choice we did not make. The technology industry made this choice because their whole business model is based on our time as a resource, time and data actually, and they need us to stay online for as long as possible so they can collect more data about us and they can target advertising at us. So they designed features online using well-known psychology principles to make sure we stay online for as long as possible. Still, we think we are in control and we blame ourselves. And we think we need to help ourselves. We look for self-help methods. And what the technology industry does is so sophisticated because they really want us to feel that we are in control. So they give us these tools to help ourselves, thereby enhancing the illusion of control. On the iPhone, we get screen time, which shows us how much time we spend online. We even have an option to limit how much time we spend on certain apps. If you go on Instagram, you can put notifications to tell you how long to stay there. Or basic notifications that tell you you've been there for some time, take a break. And the thing is, these tools were never meant to succeed because the goal is not to have us spend less time online. They are only there to make us feel that we are responsible if we're not using them and are not succeeding. I think it's important to know also that there is already a lot of legal action taking place. And there are, I would say, two types of legal reforms. One, to apply pressure on technology companies to redesign their technologies to take away and change the designs that make us stick online for so long. And you can see that in the United States, there are lots of class actions by parents against game makers, against social networks. School districts are now suing as well. They're suing because of the effect on kids and because these companies are addicting kids to stay on for longer and thereby their mental health is affected or they become addicted and play games forever. So this is already happening. There's been lots of legislation attempts, especially to protect children. And it's important to understand that failure is not a failure because all of this exerts pressure and causes bad PR for tech companies. It takes time. That's what I learned from studying the past. There's no magic pill. It's lots of things that can happen at the same time that's likely to push things forward. There are many ways to exert pressure. I mentioned two of them. Another thing is basically changing the way we use spaces to contain overuse. What do I mean by that? And that's a place I think it's important to emphasize. This is not just for lawyers. That's a place where everybody can make a difference. The most important place is schools. Right now, the policy is the more technology, the better, maximizing technology in the classroom. Since the pandemic, teachers are teaching more with games, with social networks, posting their lectures on TikTok, using Minecraft. Whatever happens in school does not stay at school. infiltrates into the home. If Minecraft is homework, you cannot tell your kid to get off the computer. So exerting pressure on schools individual schools or on district is something that parents can do. Changing norms and how we use changing norms in businesses. For example, a restaurant owner, there's an option. Do you use a QR code and have people take out their phone right when the meal starts, or do you use regular menus? There are lots of choices to be made, and we never thought we're going to see smokeless bars, but in the mid 1990s, they became our reality. I think the pandemic did two things. One thing was it made the problem worse because people started using technology in ways they never used it before, working from home, spending more time on screens. And screen time has gone up since the pandemic, and it's not going back to where it was beforehand. On the other hand, I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that it created an opportunity. Before the pandemic, the main people who were worried were parents because they looked at their children. Since the pandemic, many people felt in their bodies, mentally, what it means to be on the screen all the time, what it means not to see people in person. And there are many more people who are now aware of this and care about this and want to change things, not just parents. So I think that if before, for years, people did not pay attention, we just sort of gradually got into this situation and suddenly we're using screens all the time. Now there's an option of pausing and making a change. The book tells the reader to stop blaming themselves, to stop thinking that it's their fault that they're using the technology too much. And the idea is that we need to shift away from internal battles, each person with their own computer, each family with itself, and look towards collective legal action. Legal action is already taking place, but there's room for everybody, not just for lawyers. There's lots of room for collective action to change norms in communities.